On this episode of Music Detectives, we're finally at Conway's first album. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you. Normally, when someone thinks of an album getting released, they think about just the big 33 and a couple of singles. Well, back in 1959, they did things a little differently. They actually released the album, but they also released 3 separate records that they called EPs that had all the album songs separated onto each. And I ain't lying.
It's time for a Lion story.
MGM was founded in 1924 when Marcus Lowe gained control of Metro Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures Corporation, and Louis B. Mayer Pictures. Goldwyn Pictures logo, which featured the lion and the famous design, was used for the new MGM Studio logo. The first lion's name was Slats. The second lion, and the first to roar in talking movies, was Jackie. Even though 3 other lions, Telly, Coffee, and Tanner, would be used in Technicolor films, Jackie would be the lion for all black and white films until 1956. In 1956 came the 6th lion, George. George would barely last 1 year. Leo would become the 7th lion in 1957 and is still the lion presently seen today. Despite the change in lions during the 1950s, MGM Records would use yellow backgrounds with Jackie on the label until it was redesigned or updated in 1960. The new label featured a black background and the MGM logo featuring Leo the Lion. While most still logos show Leo roaring, this logo is of Leo right before he roars. The MGM Records logo, what I call the BQ logo because it looks like a B and Q put together with a record and lion, would be used on the cover or jacket of albums until 1961. It would then change to a squared off picture of a lion with MGM letters on top and the word records on the bottom, and would last for a few years. In 1965, MGM created a more contemporary logo, the stylized lion as it would be called, which was used in front of 3 films, one being 2001: A Space Odyssey, before reinstating Leo. When the stylized lion was adopted for films, so too did the record division change the label to incorporate it, and it is probably more recognized on the records than for use on the silver screen. The design would go on to be incorporated into the MGM Resorts logo.
Now it's time for a Music Detectives detailed inspection.
Alright everybody, we're going to be looking at Conway's first album, Conway Twitty Sings. But before we get to the actual album, we got to talk about the singles. The first single obviously was It's Only Make Believe, but technically it wasn't from the album yet. They had no plans to make an album. So the first one to ever be released with the album in mind was this one right here, The Story of My Love. Flip side's going to be Make Me Know You're Mine. So this one was the first one to ever come out with the idea that they would hope to sell not only it, but hopefully the album. If we look a little closer at the album, this one's pretty rough. This 7-inch 45 is pretty rough, but we have the letter D on the corner there. And then along the side here, we have 58XY 1230. And we have if you can see this one, there's a smaller one right there on this side, on the Story of My Love side, on the K12748. On the flip side of this, we have the letter B right there, and again the 58XY 1281, and again we do have the small number 1 on there. So you have Make Me Know Your Mind and The Story of My Love. Again, coming out right as they were releasing the Conway Twitty Sings. Now, there is a second single, and this second single is Mona Lisa. Flip side is Heavenly, and Heavenly was not on Conway Twitty Sings, but on the second album. So this one kind of is a hybrid of both albums, and you can see it's not even mentioned on the label that it the songs are actually on part of different albums. So anyway, taking a look at the details of this vinyl, you can see the letter A followed by the 58 XY 316 C-1, it looks like there. And then on the flip side, Heavenly, which is we have the letter C. Let's see if we can see that C. And then 59 XY 474. So Heavenly on the Mona Lisa side, but off the second album, not the first. Before we can get to the full 33 album, there were the 345 EPs. Each one looked like this one here. They were this size. We'll pull out the full album here and let you see the difference in size. You can see much smaller because it is the 45 as opposed to a 33. So you have a 7-inch diameter disc going in here versus a 12-inch disc for the full album. So this one is a volume 2 basically. There were just say volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. On the flip side, it would be the same exact right up, and then you would have just again the changing the song. So you have 4 songs across 345, so you have a 12 song 33 and 45. So why would they do that? Why would they give us 345s? Well, before 1960, they decided that they would do this for a couple of reasons. One, probably for the budget, and 2, for those who have 45 only record players, they could get the 3 smaller records as opposed to having to buy something new, because back in those days, yet the 45s and the 33s, there weren't a lot of players that could play both, and there was still some doubt as to which format would win. And it turned out, as many of you know, that the 45 and 33 ended up becoming just as important because they ended up being on the same players. So of the 3, you have X641, you have X1640, which is the first one, and that is this one right here. 4 songs we have was It's Only Make Believe, Hallelujah, I Love You So, First Romance, and Make Me Know You're Mine. And Make Me Know You're Mine we saw was with The Story of My Love on the single. So if we take a little closer look at this, we can see the 46, likely if this was in a jukebox, indication of what number you would play to get to these songs. You can see there is the letter A there. Can't quite catch it, but it's right there. You can see that. And then the 59 EP23. And EP, of course, standing for extended play. On this side, we have, again, the letter A, barely making an imprint on there. And 59 EP24. Now, in addition to the yellow label, as we pointed out in previous videos, the label changed in 1960. So the label for the 1640s pressed in 1960 came with the black label as opposed to the yellow label. So the original set is in yellow, any repressings are in black. You can also see that the lows incorporates down here on both the black and white, because the lows didn't go away till the middle of 1960, so the first black pressings will have the lows incorporated, and then later pressings would all have the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer on them. Of course, this one had The Story of My Love, I'll Try, and Sentimental Journey, and I Vibrate My Head to My Feet. And if we take a look at this A side, again we have the letter A followed by 59 EP26. And on this side here we have the letter A again followed by EP 5925. So that's your X1641 extended play 45, which is volume 2 of Conway Twitty Sings. Volume 3 is X1642, and that includes You'll Never Walk Alone, Don't You Know, and then on the flip side, My One and Only You, and Mona Lisa, which again gets paired with Heavenly from the following album. And on this one we can see, only on this side here, we have a bit of markings. We have a faint letter A again up in here, if you could hit it just right. And then it's 59 EP 28 there. And on the flip side, again, we have a faint A. That etching must not have been too good on the lacquer or the stamper. And you have 59 EP 27 on this side. So the 33, that's right here. See it in all its glory. This one's a little more beat up. You have the, what I call the BQ logo of MGM up in the right. This is catalog number E3744. On the flip side, you have the listing of all the songs, and then you have your detailed information about Conway and where he came from, the Phyllis Kemley Roundlers, the whole little spiel all the way up to It's Only Make Believe. Now this, again, follows the same pattern as we showed with the EP. The original pressing in 1959 includes the yellow label. And when we get to it in just a few moments, the black label for the repressing. Just take a quick look. You see this is pretty rough, but let's see some of the etchings on this. You can see the E3744 S1, probably for side 1. And then on the other side, we have 58 MG660. 58 MG660 on this. And we have even up in here, looks like the letter C. You can see that. Okay, and the back side of this, we have the letter B, followed by, again, E3477. It looks like S2 for side 2, right there, hard to see. And of course the 58 MG661 to the artists that are credited for writing the songs. Keep that in mind for a moment. And let's bring in the black version. And you can see here the side 2. I'm going to flip over to side 1 here for a moment. And you can see First Romance. You can see it's credited to Twitty and Matthews Jr. And if we look on the black label, we can see it's Twitty and Nance that were credited. So they did change that. You can see that this pressing, again, the black label still says Lowe's because it was early in 1960. Even though it's not a first pressing, because that's the first thing you can notice with the black. And again, we still have the same MG pressing labeled there, the letter B, E3477, S1, and the number 1 on this side. On the flip side, again, we have the 58 MG661, the number 3. You can see that, number 3 right there. And then S2 for the side, E3477, and the letter A. Here's the original sleeves that have kind of albums, and with the stereo, you also get the stereo disc across the top, and now it is stereo E3744. The back, again, has changed up a little bit. Stereo E3477 as opposed to just saying E3477. They'll get a little wiser later on. You'll see that the stereo and the mono versions of these records will all have the same. But the original stereo, most people put this on eBay as an original or first pressing with the black label, but we know that can't be because they were using this label, yellow label, in 1959. And you can see again, stereo, 45/45 stereo disc, and again it's in yellow, and that makes it the original stereo. If you get the black version of the stereo, that one's going to have issues as well with the label. You'll see that the same mistakes from the mono version follow the versions here on the stereo. You can see the black label now has stereo and 45/45 stereo disc as well with the stereo. Same thing on the back. And if we look at they can even write OSS stereo and number there, as they kept different catalog numbers internally for the stereo versions of the songs versus the mono versions of the song. We can see that same OSS stereo even on the yellow labels. So you have your mistakes and different colors going forth on them. And then finally, we have the last one that not many people seen, not many people have. It's pretty rare. Is the Conway Twitty Sings in stereo. There supposedly is, according to some record catalogs, a mono version of this record, basically known as the orange cover, with a different, completely different. You can notice the larger lettering, different colors there. Of course, the orange background, and of course, a whole different picture of Conway. Still follows the same. Now, the biggest thing here is the catalogs don't list when this was released, so that's a mystery we're going to try and nail down or close in on. You can see that the orange versions have the black. You can see now, instead of saying lows like our previous ones did, it now says low. Instead of lows, it says Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. So we know that didn't come around till later in 1960. And the other album that was coming out in late 1960 was Conway Twitty's Greatest Hits. We also have evidence, we'll put that on the screen, of Connie Francis, and you could see her album is, well, not album, but EPs and a couple other EPs released around late 60, early 61, have the same background orange color and the same blue colored lettering for the title. Font's a little different, you could tell the difference in the C, but for the most part they're the same, so we're getting closer a 60, early 61 time frame. Back on the record label itself here, we could see they couldn't possibly go past 1963 because here you have the label saying 45/45 stereo disc, and that 45/45 goes away in 63, so we know it can't go past that. But we also know that with Connie Francis's album, chances are they probably did that same artistic look around that time. So we can pretty much conclude that this album, Conway Twitty Sings in orange, came out either late 60 or early 61. Now, the other interesting thing we have with this record is we do, again, still have the stereo etching and number on there. We do have the SE number and the letter 8 and side 1, S1 and all that. But the biggest thing is this little marker right here. which looks like kind of like an ice cream cone with a bar through it, or an anvil or something. Not really an anvil, but mostly described as a ice cream cone with a bar through it is the best way to describe it. And this particular symbol means that it was pressed in New Jersey, Bloomfield, New Jersey. So both albums that I've had that have been orange came with that symbol on them, indicating that they were pressed in New Jersey. Now that doesn't tell us too much about the dates, but it might tell us of the limited quantities that this album had. I have never seen the version without the stereo on it, although some sources says that should be true. Some do not even mention the alternative cover at all. So there's really no promotional information that I could find that would indicate why this album was made. It could have been just a coincidence, but I think that it either had to do with a convention or the fact that Conway's Greatest Hits was coming out, and so they came out with a special alternative cover for his first album to coincide with the Greatest Hits album. That seems to fit, using Coney Francis and those other things we talked about as evidence for it. If you have any more information or know anyone who has this album, whether it be in stereo or non-stereo, or has any other additional markings, or knows anyone who might have more information, just leave it in the comments below. That's it. Well, thanks for watching. If you loved what you saw, hit that like button below. If you didn't like this stupid show, hit the dislike button, but make sure you hit it twice. And also subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notifications for our next new episode.